Welcome to our podcast. This is Coming Out Stories. I'm Emma Goswell and I'm your host. It's brought to you by What Goes On Media. By the way, if you listen to us on Spotify, which I know lots of you do, please do give us a little review. It literally takes a second to give us a star rating. 5 would be very nice and we would love you forever. Thank you. Right, let's crack on with this episode, shall we? Yet again, a kind soul has come forward to tell me the intimate details behind their coming out process. This time, you're going to hear from Clifford. He's a real man of the world. He's of Indian heritage, grew up in Dubai, in a Catholic family, and now lives in Australia. I began by asking him how he identifies.
So I identify as he, him, his, and in terms of my sexual orientation, it's an interesting one because I am in a relationship with another male. So, socially gay, it makes it easier to say it's gay. Personally, I think more along the sapiosexual sort of spectrum in terms of interested in the person's personality and who they are and their intelligence and what the kind of conversations. So more connected to conversational level and the intelligence level and personality level than just physically.
So that's interesting. I don't think anyone's ever said to me they're sapiosexual. Explain this to me then. Is it the same as pansexual?
It is, to my understanding. Pansexual is more about personality, and sapiosexual brings a bit of I wouldn't want to call it intelligence because it almost seems a bit posh, but it's almost a bit of the ability to connect on that deeper level of conversation on issues and things like that. To me, it's one of those things which I've reflected on a little while in terms of really where do I see myself, what am I attracted to in a person, and it's always been beyond just their physicalities as such.
So am I going to guess that you have had relationships with women in the past then?
Correct, yeah. I was going to get engaged to one ages ago.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah.
But didn't work out. Would you say, if it is a spectrum, you might be more on the gay end of the spectrum, or it just so happened that you met the one and they were a man?
I think it's really met the one and they were a man. Probably I need to give you a bit of context to where I'm coming from with all of this, right?
Good plan, Clifford. Let's place you in a date and a country or part of the world.
Yeah. So I grew up in the Middle East in Dubai. Now, growing up there in the 90s, 2000s, there wasn't this concept of the word gay and what gay actually meant. So I moved to Australia for context in 2008. So growing up, I was born in 89, growing up in Dubai till 2008, the concept of the word gay was just something which you heard on TV shows every now and then, not really in a very formed way in terms of what it means. My mum knew someone who she thought was gay, but was, she spoke about him or them, I don't know what their pronouns are, as being more of a cross-dresser who enjoyed dressing up in women's clothing. So in my mind, growing up as a teenager, that was not me because I quite like being male. I quite like expressing my gender as male. So how could I be gay if I don't like dressing up in women's clothing? As I got older, we saw a lot of, people who were very effeminate socially, and quite the culture was to say, oh yeah, they could be, that way. And I wasn't effeminate, so I wasn't that way. But I knew that I was quite different from all the other blokes my age because while they were just only talking about girls, I was talking or interested in women and in some way in men too. So it was just this whole weird difference of where do I sit? Naturally, I'm a bit of a curious sort. So, I'm an academic, as you know, Emma. Mm-hmm. And I always put it down to, maybe it's just curiosity. Maybe it's just curiosity. Maybe there's nothing to it. It's just curiosity because how could I be like that? I don't want to dress up as a woman. I present as a male. I'm quite comfortable in my gender expression.
But we obviously had no point of reference then, did you, really, apart from what your mother had said, really?
Totally. And I often think about it as the colour blue because I've heard stories like the colour blue was the last colour to be named, apparently, right? And the seafarers could say, oh, look, look at what the sky is. They couldn't really call it blue. And I tend to think about it like that, like I knew what I was, but I did not know what I was. So went along with that journey as I was getting older, going through, high school and all that, moved to Australia when I got to university, and this will give you an idea of how sheltered perhaps I was. So in my first week on campus, they were giving out condoms. And someone handed a condom to me, and I thought, oh my God, this is really liberal. So it was just this whole shocking realization that this could actually happen publicly and socially. And oh my God, what am I doing here? So, going from there, I continued studying at the university.
Well, hang on a minute. Could we just rewind a little bit? We would not even mention the fact that if you grew up in Dubai, you were growing up in a country where it was illegal to be gay.
Totally. It's exactly. I think it's one of those places where it's still illegal. And I come from an Indian background, so it was illegal in India too. And because of that, there was really no one to talk to, no one to see, no one to have a conversation with about what this was. It was never a concept really, because it was just that taboo. Now, that's not to say that didn't happen, because now when I look back at my life and people I know in Dubai, I know there are a lot of LGBTQIA plus people in Dubai who are living great lives.
Oh, there are. Apparently Grindr's very active in Dubai, or the equivalent.
Yeah, and apparently there's a clubbing scene now too, which I didn't know about. So,
Really?
I'm quite pleased to see that there are those opportunities. Of course, disheartened to know, people that I know who are gay in Dubai, for instance, live with their partner, but they live like flatmates. So it is quite disheartening, because I'm sure you'd understand the value of acknowledging a relationship and solidifying that relationship. If you can't publicly acknowledge it and define it, it's really hard to personally also really engage in it in a very meaningful way sometimes.
Yeah, and apart from the fact you haven't got any rights, in terms of the legal stuff and monetary worth as well.
Absolutely. So I'm very pleased for myself to be able to live in a country where I can have those rights and be myself. And, being able to support people in Dubai and India who also identify with the rainbow communities who don't have the same visibility.
And obviously, Dubai is a multinational community now, but it is intently a Muslim country. But that's not your background, is it? You're from India, but you're not Muslim, am I right?
Yeah, that's correct. So I was born Catholic. I still practice every now and then, the main days. And that too was another layer of challenge in a way, because, well, according to the Catholicism I grew up with, you had to be straight or you were going to turn into a pillar of salt. So there was a lot of a lot of that to get through. But having said that, I think as I've gotten older, my religious beliefs have helped me accept who I am in a better way.
Oh, okay. In what sense?
Well, in Sydney, I found a group which is a gay Catholic community, and they have regular church services and things. I don't go very often. But there's also that realization that you can be gay and Catholic. It's not one or the other. And I remember having this conversation with some of them and with people over time about, well, the Bible says we're born in God's image. How do we all fit in? And I think there is that acknowledgement, and it's great to see that the current Pope actually talk about it is not, as it shouldn't be illegal. I'm happy to see that progress. I'd love for them to say it's not a sin, happy days. We're not there yet. But, I'm glad to see that progress in thinking about where sexuality and religion fit in, because it shouldn't be one or the other. And I think that just causes a world of hurt to have it separated like that.
And have you felt pressure in the past to maybe confess and, go to confession and talk about your sexuality?
Oh, God, yes. All those stories I would have told those priests. But at the risk of making an inappropriate joke. Yeah, I did. And, I often spoke about it in confession, because I thought, well, that's one of the conversations which I was just relaying in a way in terms of how do I fit in? If God made us all perfectly, how do I fit in? I don't think for a long time the church had an answer to that. For me, I'm in a monogamous relationship. I have a partner. I live a very boring life. Like, I go to the supermarket on the weekend, to the hardware store. Like, my relationship in my life is no different to my mum and dad.
I'm laughing because it's not what people imagine the gay dream to be, is it? They imagine it to be so much more glamorous and fun, I think, sometimes. And we're just as boring as the rest of the planet, aren't we?
Very much. Had a mate who came over from New Zealand once who said to us, I want to do things that you do. So we gave her some clothes to wash. I don't know.
Oh, I love it. So let's rewind again to when you arrived in Australia then. You went to university, so I'm guessing you're sort of 18, 19, you get to Sydney, you've got all this liberalism and newfound freedom and condoms given out on campus. What did you do? Were you like a kid in a sweetie store? Did you run off to the equivalent of the gay village in Sydney and meet lots of men?
I think we got to remember Catholic guilt, right? So I remember getting these condoms and going, oh my God, this is what's going on here? Got to turn into a pill of salt. So that was my first experience at being in a liberal environment, completely liberal environment. And as time progressed, I think it just helped me realize who I was a bit more. So in Dubai, there are lots of websites blocked. In Australia, of course, you had Manhunt, you had, I think, Gator, it was back in the day. You had all these different channels which you could suddenly find people on. So I moved here when I was 18, which was 2008. It wasn't roughly around until about 2012 that I actually started engaging and trying to figure out who I am. And, I said to you earlier, I was in a relationship with a woman that broke up. And at that time I went, well, I've always felt this. I need to look into this a little bit more, right? Like, I don't know what this is. And I do not know whether it's just curiosity or whether it's just a phase, as people say. But I need to work out what this is for myself, because it's been something that's been at the back of my mind for so long.
And what an amazing place to be doing it, though. I mean, what a great choice to move from Dubai to Sydney. It is such a gay mecca, isn't it?
Oh, totally. I think we've got a lot of amazing things happening in Sydney. Like this year, we've got World Pride. So it's been just amazing and fabulous to see how the queer communities have come together for it. And also the allies in our straight communities, because... Digressing slightly, Emma, I do a lot of work in Pride in rural communities and regional areas.
Okay.
Because, we might think Australia is very inclusive. Yes, it is. But there are still rural and regional communities where there are challenges and there's a lot of stigma and issues, right? So it's amazing to see how straight people within these rural communities come together to support the LGBT residents, the LGBT friends. Like, it's beautiful when you're walking these Pride events and you see, young families with their kids dressed up in Pride colours, their dog dressed up in Pride colours. It just tells you that it's nothing really. It's nothing that should be an issue anymore.
And this is in the interior then, because I always think that in Australia and in America, actually, the more liberal places are based on the coasts, aren't they, really?
That still is true. I think, the more liberal places are Sydney, Melbourne. They've got a bigger gay community, bigger queer space and neighbourhoods, gayborhoods. But it's amazing to see this move now into the regions, because really we can't just have inclusion on the coast, right? We can't have it in the main cities. So it's amazing to see this grow in those spaces, because I remember this story a young girl's mother told me. So I was doing this interview about why this mother and daughter were at this Pride event. And, suddenly the daughter, who's about 13 or 14, comes running up and goes, "Mummy, I've got friends here." And in my head, I'm going, well, you're 13, 14, surely you've got friends in school, right? Like, it's just what we all should have as that age. And she ran away, and her mother goes to me, she's really excited because she's finally found people who identify as lesbian like she does. And in school, she often gets called tranny instead of being acknowledged as being lesbian.
What?
Now, that's hurtful when you're that age. And it's really sad to hear that that's the case. I don't know how much of it is from lack of knowledge in terms of not knowing the difference between what trans is and what being a lesbian is. I don't know how much of it is from an intention to bully. But either ways, we need to change that. We need to demonstrate that we're still there and we're still residents. We're still doing as everyone else does, going to Bunnings and going to the supermarket and doing all the boring things. And it's amazing that's why these events have moved. It's amazing to see these events move into those places because of that, because it gives those places a chance to go, well, they're actually no different. They're just as boring as we all are.
Yeah, absolutely. There's this line in Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, that has always struck me, and I always remember it. And it's a line from Guy Pearce, and he's talking about the suburbs when they leave Sydney and they go out towards Ayers Rock. And he says that the suburbs, I'm not sure if they're there to keep them out or us in, as in the gays and the drag queens.
Yes.
But it was a really poignant line, and I always thought, oh my God, what is that? What is this invisible barrier where gays have to stay in the cities and not go into rural areas? It's weird.
And that plays out really differently because, I work at a regional rural university where I chaired the Ally Network for a couple of years. And I remember this student who came out and saw them at a coffee shop. And I said, "Hey, how you going? How's your girlfriend?" Because they had a girlfriend. "Oh, we broke up, and I said, "Oh, really? How come?" "Oh, I came out." And the next question was, "Didn't you know?" And I was like, "No, I didn't." But having a chat with them, what I realised is their view of what being gay is so different because of the lack of exposure. So for them, it was all about sex, drugs and rock and roll kind of a thing. And how can I be a good gay if I don't have the right body? How can I be, a good gay if I'm not partying? And a lot of that comes from when you're in rural regional places and you're not seeing other LGBT people, you have this weird warped version of what's on TV.
Yeah, Or you go to the clubs, and the clubs are full of young, beautiful people with tight clothing on, and they've been to the gym a lot.
Exactly. So it's great to see, how even media, because that was my case too, right? Like I would have heard the word gay maybe on, I don't know, I'm thinking Friends or one of those TV shows that used to be on TV when I got home from school. Because of censorship in Dubai, they wouldn't have really shown shows that project gay people in a positive way. So you had these really weird skews about what does it mean to actually be gay. And the more I've reflected on that, the more I've done research in this space for my own scholarship, the more comfortable I've got with, well, gay is really whatever you want it to be. It's the most liberating thing that has happened to me, because I've always been the goody two-shoes, right? Like I've always been I'll study till midnight and then I'll go to class in the morning and do my math exam. Like I've always been that guy who stays out of trouble. But accepting myself for being queer, being gay, being sapiosexual, whatever you want to call it, for not being heterosexual in many ways has been so liberating to me to go, I can be what I want to be and still be a good person, still have the right values that I have, and be raised with the same values that my parents raised me. And it's not one or the other.
It isn't. So what happened then when you decided, I'm going to explore this side of myself, I'm going to maybe finish with a girlfriend and maybe find a boyfriend? How did it pan out for you, Clifford?
So I definitely was on the apps, caught up with a few people, and it took a long time because I was like, this is a bit too much for me initially. So it went in sort of waves, I suppose, as it normally does, where you get, oh yeah, I'll give this a go. Oh wait, no, it's too intense. Oh wait, let me keep at it. And I remember the last year of my PhD. Most people come out of a PhD with a doctorate. I came out gay and with a doctorate. Last year of my PhD, I met this guy and I went, I like you, but I don't like you in the way that I should like you. I like you more than what I should. Mm-hmm. And we really got to know each other. He moved to London, but we spent a lot of time getting to know each other. And it was quite amazing for me along that journey to just go, well, this is what I enjoy and this is what I want. So it was perhaps that moment of finishing the thesis. It was sort of the perfect moment in life, at that threshold moment in terms of going, where do I go next? So it was amazing to meet him, and I think he taught me a lot about myself in terms of who I wanted to be and who I was and what I enjoyed as well. And I suppose, once you start, you can't stop. So that was the beginning of that process.
And did you have a relationship with him?
I wouldn't say a relationship. I don't really know how to define what we had. We had a very interesting dynamic. We used to hang out all the time. Of course, we were intimate a fair bit. But I wouldn't call it a relationship per se, because we knew he was going to go to London. It was going to end. So, yeah, but that was perhaps the first moment I remember going, I'm comfortable doing this and being who I am. And he moved to London and, dated a few more guys on and off since then. And I think with any relationship, there is that process that you go through with going, yes, I want this quality in a person, or no, I don't want that quality in a person. That's no different to what heterosexual people would have to do as well. And that negotiating about who do I want, what do I want. For me, it has always been about being with someone who's got family or who's interested in having a family, being with someone who's got, who's got the same family values as I do, and that same sense of caring. And, I think it was 3 or 4 years after that experience that I met my current partner.
Was it love at first sight?
Oh, it was love with X-Files. He came over to watch X-Files. And we watched, the new season was just on air, and he came over and we watched it. And it was funny because the week before he was at a straight strip club in Melbourne for his mate's bucks, and he messaged me and I'm like, are you gay? Are you like, what's going on here? So he came back from the bucks night, he came over, we watched X-Files. And it was just that realisation that there was no pressure for, having sex. It was just that pressure of, let's get to know each other and see how we hang out. And I don't think any of us were close to it, but it was not driven by just sexual interest or just sex primarily. So I think it was quite nice to sort of get to know him organically. The more we got to know each other, we sort of realised, we were on the same page. He wants family. Well, he's picked out the name of his first son already. So, and I went, you know what? Yeah, that's what I want. I do want to have kids one day. I do want to have a little white picket fence. And I totally get the idea that in some ways buying into the heteronormative, but again, being queer, we can choose what we want about the heteronormative and what we don't. It's not a binary.
Exactly. And are you going to be walking down a wedding aisle sometime soon then?
Well, I'm hoping so. In 6 days is our 7th anniversary. So we've been together for a long enough time. We've been working on the adoption process in Australia and looking at options like surrogacy and fostering and things like that. I think it's definitely on the cards.
So hang on, you haven't proposed yet then, Clifford?
No, I haven't. I'm playing hard to get. No.
Are you wanting to be proposed to?
Well, it's interesting, right? Like I've had this whole question and this whole dynamic about who proposes to who in a gay relationship. We're so conditioned with what happens in heterosexual relationships. So is it the top that proposes to the bottom, or does the bottom propose to the top? I can't work it out.
And that begs a whole new question for lesbian relationships then. I don't know. I don't know who's in charge of that in my relationship. Goodness me. Oh, anyway, we've been chatting for ages and we've not even heard a single coming out story yet. So you're basically 1 foot down the aisle. Have you come out to your family?
Yes, I did. I did in 2017. So we've been dating for a while, my current partner and I, and mum and dad were over from Dubai. Emma, the funniest thing about coming out, I had it planned up to the T. I knew exactly the words I was going to say. I knew exactly where I was going to take mum and dad. I knew the whole process.
Oh, yeah. Let me guess. It didn't go according to plan. Let me guess.
Not even remotely.
Go on.
Like I was like, I'm going to take my dad to the bar. I'm going to come out to him first. We're going to sit in this corner because it's a bit private, so we can have a proper conversation. I'll buy him a beer to be a good bloke, and then tell him. Anyways, had this whole plan, and I remember coming home from work one day. I was really tired, and mum was asking me a lot of questions, and it was just in this emotional moment. I went, and I might be bi. It was just one of those whole conversations where I didn't know I was going to say it until the words were coming out.
So you said you were gay, but then you said, but I might be bi.
Exactly, because I was like, let me just ease in the cushioning, which in hindsight was actually a bad thing to do, because in mum and dad's mind, that's what stuck, that you said you were bi. So I think they got a bit stuck on that, and they had to go through that journey themselves. So that conversation happened. The immediate thing was, well, if it's something wrong with you, it can be treated, right? If there's something wrong with you, it can be healed. Yeah, and that's where they went. They were not coming at it from a we don't love you way, but they were coming at it from a you are only child. If you don't have someone in your life after we die, who are you going to be with? You're going to be alone. So it was coming from a very concerned point of view. And I know this is sort of bagging myself out in a way saying that and perhaps reducing the blame and all of that. But I know that they meant well. I know that they were really trying to grapple with what does this mean, keeping in mind the only gay people they know are potentially people who like to dress up as women, right?
So you told them both in person though, and they reacted well at the time, did they?
They were very supportive initially on the day, and then it took time for them to process what it means, right? And that's when a lot of questions and challenges started coming up. So on the day they were like, okay, that's okay. As they started processing it, they sort of went, well, if it is something, we can try and fix it. And Dad was talking about, Dad mentioned once at least, I think, conversion therapy, and I let him at it. I know the research on it, but I let him sit with the idea because I knew that that's how he was trying to process through it. They didn't know any gay person. So for them, this was like the first gay person that we know who's come out to us. I'm sure they know plenty of gay people who are not out. But this was the first time that they confronted with that. And to give you a bit of depth of emotion, like I remember once Mum was really finding it hard, and I said to her, Mum, I'm the same person, I'm here still, I'm not dead. But for her, it was like, oh yeah, but you're here still, and that's a challenge. It was this weird reasoning and rationale, which I know she doesn't remember, I know she feels really bad about. But it was just them processing it, and they processed it the best way they could. They spoke to priests who they knew. They spoke to people, friends who they knew, who are from India and from Dubai and from our traditional conservative upbringing, like which we all grew up in. So they processed it in the best way that they could. Dad had a look at a lot of websites eventually and looked at a lot of internet sites about coming out. I did actually recommend your book, by the way. I did slip him a copy when he was over recently.
Amazing. I love it.
So they went along that journey.
I mean, maybe it's because you're a bit older, or maybe it's because you're obviously quite a deep thinker, but it sounds like, all of their reservations and some of the potentially hurtful stuff that they said, you sort of understood their questioning and their potential homophobia, really.
I understood it. It didn't mean that it didn't hurt. I understood it because, you want to be able to be like, oh yeah, we love you, whatever. And, to give you a bit of backtrack, so the first person I ever came out to was actually a colleague of mine who supported me through with my PhD. And we caught up in the cafe and I said to her, look, I've got something important to tell you. Now, just as I'm saying this, I recall she got a telephone call from another gay friend of hers and she burst out crying. Now, that person had done a medical test that day, got a result back saying it was a really terrible illness that he was going to die from, only to find out weeks later that it actually wasn't that terrible illness, but a marker that had the same reaction with that terrible illness kind of a thing. Right? So he's still around and very happy and healthy.
Thank
And
you.
anyway, so my friend gets this call, she starts crying, and then I'm going in my head, yeah, I feel really terrible about this, but I've actually worked up the courage to say the words for the first time in my life. I need this moment. And she said to me, oh, yeah, you want to talk about something? And I told her. And she's my mum's age. And she said to me, oh, darling, I always knew. But I'm so glad that you worked it out. And, I love you just as much. I'm really proud of you for doing this. So I wanted my mum and dad to have that reaction.
Yes. Well, at least you had that as your first coming out, though. I mean, that sounds perfect. You found a role model. You found someone who was like a mother, someone who you looked up to, who said all the right words when you needed to hear them.
Absolutely. And I think it really helped because, we're really close friends. I call her my mother-in-law because I've got this fictional relationship with her daughter. But we're really close like that. And it's been a really safe space for me to talk about things that I couldn't talk to anyone else. So when I came out with mum and dad, yes, I did want that reaction. And the funny thing, Emma, I know they caught me watching gay porn when I was 15.
Did they?
But I don't know how much they recall of that. Because when I said that to them, they were like, no, I don't remember it. And then it was like, you surely would have known. But to them, it was, but you don't dress up like a girl or you don't act effeminately. And I'm like, and?
But I watched gay porn at 15. Yeah. The clues were there somewhere.
Yeah.
They'd brushed that under the carpet of their memories, haven't they?
Oh, totally. So it's been a journey. And now I do a lot of research in LGBT issues, as you know. For a long, long time, I haven't ever put anything on my LinkedIn or Facebook about my LGBT research. In academia, it's very common to do that, to promote the papers you publish and the work you're doing.
Yeah.
And the reason for that, I use Twitter for that because I know on Twitter I've got no family or friends on there. But on Facebook and LinkedIn, I've got a lot of family and friends. So I never wanted to do that because of mum and dad. So to give you an idea of how they've come around, this year, or rather last year when dad and mum were over, I had a chat with them and my dad's like, look, that's who you are, we'll support you. You need to actually take credit for the work you're doing and don't worry about what other people say, don't worry about what other people say to us. So they've come around from where they were to where they are now. And it's been a journey because they've only just got to know my partner last year. They've known about him for a while. There was a lot of hesitation about meeting him because the wording was, we don't want to be part of your sin. And eventually, mum met him a few years ago, just before COVID, literally 5 minutes before she got on a plane to leave Australia.
And they get on well then?
They got along really well. They talk to each other without me even knowing. I feel excluded.
And you mentioned no siblings then, no? So that wasn't an issue to come out to anyone else?
No, so no siblings. I came out to my cousins who I was close to and, my niece and nephew, well, for my cousins, they're kids. They've been really fantastic with it. My niece, I call her my niece, she's not really my biological niece in that way, but she interestingly also does research on LGBT people and in Canada. And, I know she's heterosexual, but she's got that view about want to support the inclusion of the communities. And so when I told her I was and told her about my work, it was just like, oh, great, we're on the same wavelength.
Brilliant. Well, let's talk about your work then, because that's why you're here, because you contacted us because you wanted to use some of the interviews that we'd done over the last few years. So do you want to let us know if they were useful or not, or where they were used, or what happened to them?
We're still working on it. We definitely are still working on it. But I'll give you a bit of context to my work. I went through my life not knowing who I was for a large part of it until I was able to define myself later. My aim with a lot of my research is to make sure no other kid that age goes through that. It's as simple as that, because I'd like to get us to a world where we are normalized. Do I believe it will happen in my lifetime? I'm skeptical. But if we don't make progress towards there, like your podcast, like all the other things going on, if we don't make progress towards there, what legacy do we leave for others? Right? So a lot of my work has been about how do we normalize LGBT expressions in communities? How do we make spaces more inclusive for LGBT people?
Okay.
And when I was looking at your podcast, one of the things that really struck me is we all go through these same stages and we all seek different supports. So how do we then start looking at each stage and start designing supports that suit that stage, right? So, in the questioning area, like when I was in Dubai and figuring out who I am when I came to Australia, because I was here from 2008 to 2013 without really working out exactly being comfortable with who I am. So if we had, if we had developed supports that could target those people at those different stages, it would be so much easier in some ways. It's never easy, but so much easier to be able to be who we are. At the same time, I think one of the things that we tend to ignore is it's also a journey for the families. My mum and dad trying to go to the Catholic Church for advice on LGBT issues, while they wouldn't have been comfortable going to somewhere else. So how do we bridge and build resources to bridge that gap, and publicize? There are actually a lot of Christian texts about being gay, and there's a new thing about reading the Bible, which I'm not an expert in the Bible by any means, but it's called queer theology, which is really fascinating because it looks at how the Bible is actually more inclusive or can be inclusive. So there are a lot of these resources and initiatives that happen, but they're not that packaged well or that publicly available for parents to link into and to get that support as they're going in their journey. So what I was hoping to do with the podcast is really look at what are the stages we go through and what are the stages our family and our loved ones go through along with that. To get to that point where we accept ourselves and our family gets to accept us and gets to enjoy and join in. I think we, as a community, we have a very wicked sense of humour, and it's that idea of sharing that sense of humour and that lifestyle with people we love. So how do we get to there, and what process do we all go through in that journey?
Yeah, you've just reminded me of a quote from someone I interviewed, and I've forgotten who it was now. I've interviewed that many people, but they said, if you don't get the reaction on the day that you come out to your loved ones, you have to give them some leeway and forgive them a bit, because you have obviously gone through a whole process of accepting your own sexuality or gender identity. It may be the first time they've ever thought about it. It may be the total shock value to them. So the way they react on the day is not how they're going to react tomorrow or next week or, next year. So I can't remember who said that, but it's such a valuable piece of advice, I think, isn't it, really? So they're at the beginning of their journey, whereas you've had the hindsight of maybe weeks or months or years of understanding your own journey.
Absolutely. And, and to add to your point, I think sometimes they might not know any other LGBT person. So, the first time they've ever been exposed to the concept. And, when I think about my mum and dad, they had this image of being the only child, having a daughter-in-law. They had this image of having grandkids immediately. So that very traditional model. So they've spent years imagining that in some way. And suddenly they're saying, hey, actually, there's not going to be anyone in a wedding dress on that day. It's going to be two blokes in a suit. But it's getting used to that idea that it is possible. I think what helped me was accepting that they're on that journey too, because it wasn't going to be the reaction I wanted. Is it a relationship I want now? Yes, because I bitch to my mum about my partner all the time. And it's built up to that. It's built up to what it is. And they've become more accepting about, that idea that there will be two men and a child in the household, which is very different to what they grew up with and what they've seen all their lives.
Well, I'm guessing with all this research that you've done and your lived experience as well, Clifford, you are excellently placed to answer my final question of advice to other people who are listening who haven't got to this stage yet.
Yeah, I think I'm going to start with the beauty of liberation, right? Like there is this beautiful sense of being who you are. And it is a privilege, and I do mean the word privilege in many ways, to be out and to work yourself to a place where you can be at. It takes a lot of support along the way because not everyone can be in the same position. Like I've interviewed people who are ethnically diverse, have a disability, dependent on their family and scared of coming out because what does that mean for the support that they could get? They could be really in a lot of strife. It's choose your own journey approach is what I'm saying. We all have different abilities, different capacities to be able to come out. But I think what I would say is it is a beautiful thing. And once you work out the supports that you need and how you can, how you can support yourself well, that could be a group of friends. Like I had the person who said to me, I love you just as you are. That could be anyone really. And once you work that out, in my case, it was also my partner who helped me come with my own coming out. Because for me, coming out was about I need to validate him in my life as well. I can't just have him as a dirty secret because that's not right by him. So yes, once you have the supports in place, I think, it's really about know that there is a life after, know there is a community that will find you, that you will find, that will embrace you. And know that you're not the only one going through it. Every question, every concern you've had, other people have grappled with, and, we've come out. We've been able to do it. So try and reach out for the supports if you're finding yourself alone. I know you will have them.
Thank you so much, Clifford. So great to talk to you. And I just love that he even tried to use our book to aid his coming out with his parents. You can do the same should you wish. You can find it in all good bookstores, by the way. It's simply called Coming Out Stories. And I'm really looking forward to hearing what comes of his research based on coming out stories as well. We will keep you posted, don't worry. Now, next episode, we'll be heading back to the States to meet Dharma. She's an incredible crime writer who puts lesbian and trans women at the heart of her books.
It really hit home. First grade, they let us out for recess, and the teacher said, okay, all the girls go down the hill to play jump rope and play house and all that stuff, and all the boys go up the hill to play kickball or whatever. And I instinctively started going out with the girls because I just felt like I fit in with them better than I fit in with the boys. Girls made sense to me, And the teacher said, no, you got to go up the hill with the rest of the boys. I'm like, I'm not a boy.